Hey there, I'm Alicia Malone. Welcome to AMC Rewind. I just have to do it every single time. This is the show that reminds you of some great films to watch this weekend. My regular co-host, Jon Schnepp, is out again this week. So helping me out is AMC's very own Mr. Mark Ellis.
That's right. I am so excited to be back on AMC Rewind. I had such a good time. Your comments were so nice the last time.
Yeah, we just time traveled, and now you know exactly what happened. Mr. Mantz is here too.
Yes, great for me to be back too. My gosh, thank you all for those great comments. You really know how to make
Really
a guy
nice.
feel great. It's great to be with my Profiles co-host and co-producer Alicia Malone.
And of course,
courtesy high five.
You're also from Access Hollywood.
Yes.
So you know what's up.
What's up about the Kardashians? Everything you want to know? I am not the guy to ask.
So you may have guessed from these guys' T-shirts that we are talking about 80s adventure movies. Now that encompasses a whole range of films. So we're going to mention some of our favorites right now, and then we're going to get into a few in detail. So the 80s was such a great time for these action adventure kids movies. It was just after Star Wars, and I feel like there were so many great movies that were original, not based on anything.
Yeah, I could talk about all day how Star Wars influenced movies in the 80s. And when you look at adventures and the comedic spin on adventures, when you have something like either Real Genius or Weird Science or Short Circuit, there was a science fiction element into a lot of things went on in the 80s, including those madcap adventures. So I think it was the best combination of genres. It was a great time to have multiple interests in one film.
The early to mid 80s were such a groundbreaking time that no one realized it at the time. But yes, you had The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, but you also had the ultimate 80s adventure, one of the greatest movies of all time, came out in 1981, doesn't take place in the 80s. That, of course, is Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
That is the ultimate adventure, 80s and beyond. But also, this was a time when, as a director and as a producer, Steven Spielberg was at the top of his game.
Definitely.
Directing movies like E.T. and Raiders, and then also producing movies like The Goonies, Gremlins, and Back to the Future.
Oh, yeah. And there was also movies like Labyrinth and The Lost Boys, Princess Bride.
Legend,
Neverending Story, which I went to. That was my first film that I ever saw in a cinema. With my mum took me there, and when the horse got stuck, I cried,
poor
and
Alicia
I was
Malone. Oh, you're into
screaming
horses.
because
Yes.
I love horses, and I had to be taken out of the cinema. Also, Ghostbusters. So many great movies. So many great times to be a kid.
Absolutely, yeah. And when I was growing up, I was a very little kid in the 80s, and I was an Air Force brat, so you move around a lot. So sometimes what a parent needs to do is just drop their kids off at the movies for a few hours. And I can't wait to talk about not only the two that are featured here today, but also the one that you may not have heard of,
Oh, yeah.
that you need to go back and revisit. That was my first theatrical experience where I made it to the end of the movie. So,
Oh, that's great.
But the early 80s, I was in high school in the early 80s, early to mid 80s, maybe even a little bit of the late 80s.
You're much better on movie dates than you are on your own personal
Well, I'm
knowledge.
trying not
Doesn't
to give it
wanna
away,
reveal
but
the
here's
age.
sort of a dead giveaway for how old I am. But you're only as old as you feel, and these movies still, to this day, make me feel like a kid. They always take me back to that feeling of excitement and that sense of whimsy that you feel watching these movies, especially Raiders and The Goonies, and especially an underrated film, even though it made a lot of money. I'm a big fan of Gremlins. Gremlins is so fun. It's like the dark cousin to E.T. But and that's written by Chris Columbus, along with another film that we're going to be talking about right now.
All right, well, let's get into it. We could go on forever talking about our favorite 80s films, but let's focus on two specifically. Rewind recommends Back to the Future, released in 1985, directed by Robert Zemeckis, starring Michael J. Fox as Marty McFly, a teenager sent back in time to 1955 and then has to try not to screw up history so he can return back to the future of 1985. Also starred, of course, the wonderful Christopher Lloyd as Doc Brown. Back to the Future to date has made over $380 million worldwide. It spawned a franchise. It became a brand. It changed the adventure genre, paved the way for more high-concept films. It's a cultural phenomenon. Mark, what do you remember about the first time Back to the Future.
Wanted to be Marty McFly so bad when I was a kid. And I remember that, because again, my parents didn't make it out to the movies a lot. So they took us to see Return of the Jedi. Then they took a few years off and they went to go see Back to the Future because our family would watch Family Ties and I was too young to get any of that stuff. But there was this kid, Michael J. Fox, who was so personable and so talented and so funny. You always try to think about what is the one thing about Back to the Future that makes you keep coming back for more. There's so much greatness in there from such a variety of angles, but it might be the fact that they kicked Eric Stoltz off the set and brought in Michael J. Fox because Eric Stoltz might have been fine in the role and it still would have been a really cool movie, but Michael J. Fox had a magic when he was playing Marty McFly that you just can't bottle up.
Whoa, that is heavy. Well, there's that word again, heavy. Is there something wrong with the Earth's gravitational pull of the year 1985? Here's the thing about Back to the Future. Just from a perspective right now, it is a perfect movie. Like when they talk about the perfect screenplays that they teach in screenwriting classes around the country, they talk about Casablanca, they talk about All About Eve, but they should also be talking about Back to the Future because everything that you see in the first act or everything you hear about in the first act, especially when the McFlys are having breakfast, you see it all pay off throughout the course of the rest of the film. All of it, everything that you hear about has a visual payoff. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant structure, but my first time seeing this movie on July 3rd, 1985, which is the day it came out, I was kind of a late bloomer when it came to dating, and I was fixed up with this girl named Joanne. It was a double date. Barry and Lynn, who were dating, and me and Joanne, who I met on this date. And on the car ride on the way over, we're sitting in the back seat, and she's like asking me questions, and I know this may seem hard to believe, but I was really shy, and I was giving like one-word answers. I was really, really nervous. She was really pretty, so I was like, tongue-tied. So then we go see the movie, like we're sitting in the theater, and the lights come down. I'm like, oh, thank God the movie's starting. So then the movie starts, and like immediately I get into it. When I get into a film, I sit forward in my seat.
I've seen it. I sat next to Scott Mantz in many a screening, and this guy gets pumped up.
I sit forward in my screen, and I was like totally blown away. It was had such an impact on me, maybe even more than a film like Star Wars or Empire, because I was a little older and I could appreciate things about it. So after the film, we went out to Friendly's Ice Cream. Did you have a Friendly's Ice Cream in Australia?
No.
In Williamsburg, Virginia, we had a Friendly's Ice Cream.
Give it up for Friendly's, baby.
The site of many a first date.
Wait. This is the payoff. This is the moment that I became Mantz. We're sitting there.
The origin story.
The origin of Mantz. We're talking the origin of Mantz. We're talking about the movie. And I'm like, oh my God. And then this happened. And then this happened. And the special effects were great. And the DeLorean, how cool was that? And Joanne, she was just sitting there. She was just like in love with the Mantz. Oh. I won her over.
I thought you were going to say it was the opposite.
No.
Like, stop talking about the movie.
Wow, this guy is awesome.
I'm glad no one else at Friendly tried to make out with her. Then you had to say, hey, you, get your damn hands off
of her.
Well, that's the thing. This movie is so quotable. It's got all these great lines. It's been ingrained into our brains. And I love a lot of these 80s movies for the reason that it's original, it's clever, and it doesn't feel like it's for kids.
No,
it
definitely
treats kids like intelligent adults that we can grasp this high concept.
Everybody's on the same level when you watch this movie. Everybody gets into it. And when you talk about the time travel aspect of this, the thing about time travel movies, it's not whether the time travel makes sense scientifically. It's whether the movie is entertaining enough to make you not care. And so when you go back to 1955, you're so in awe of this world and where his parents came from and seeing a young George McFly. And you're right, everything that they set up calls back to it, not just with Marty and Doc, but with George McFly and with Biff Tannen, one of the great bullies in movie history.
When you look at that butthead,
is Thomas F. Wilson's Biff character. He's so good.
Well, this movie was nominated for 4 Academy Awards. It won 1 for visual effects, but it was also nominated for screenplay. And it's a perfect screenplay. I'm glad it was nominated. Should have won, but the fact that it was nominated is a testament just how well written that this movie is. A movie like this, you would imagine that it would just get nominated in all the technical categories, but a strong showing with a screenplay nomination is a testament to just how brilliantly structured it is. Yeah. The characters are fully realized. It's fun. The special effects are great. It's smart. It's funny. It's charming. But for me, what really brings me back to the Future is the friendship between Marty and Doc.
Such a great
it's such a great
relationship between them.
And that's where the heart of the movie is, where Marty wants to tell Doc he's going to get shot by Libyan terrorists, and he's like, no, you can't. And then he goes back to 1985, and he's okay. And he goes, I thought, what was that about changing the future? And he goes, I figured, what the hell?
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
Great.
You can watch these movies over and over again, and they still hold up. All right, well, the next one that Rewind also recommends is The Goonies. Also released in 1985. Great year. Not as good as 1981, but great year. Directed by Richard Donner. It's about a group of kids, the Goon Dock crew, trying to save their homes from being demolished when they discover an old map with clues to find treasure. Starter Young, Josh Brolin, Sean Astin, Corey Feldman, and more. One of the highest grossing films of 1985. Favorite movie for a lot of kids. Mark, why do you love this movie so much?
I love this movie because I saw it late in life. I didn't see this film until I was already in college. So I had a mental hurdle to get over because I never saw The Goonies, but I played the Nintendo game The Goonies 2. And it's one of the most famous games in Nintendo history because you cannot beat the game.
Really?
It's like the programmers got bored. You cannot beat the game. So I just had this, I hate The Goonies. It's so frustrating. I can't do it. Then I actually saw the movie. And it's terrific. You get all those all the various different kids from different backgrounds, from different socially, ethnically, and of course,
diverse.
The Truffle Shuffle is one of the most classic moves in 1980s movies history. And I think that's a testament to how well the film holds up. Is that it wasn't like when I saw Back to the Future, I was a kid and I could fall in love with that film for the rest of my life. I could watch Goonies in college and still appreciate that it made me feel like I was a kid. I might have gone out that night and tried to build a fort or look for buried treasure or gone against the Fratelli brothers. I don't know.
Well, Goonies, I think the thing about Goonies is when you're watching that movie, even as a grown-up, it makes you feel like you did when you were a kid.
Exactly.
Because what kid wouldn't want to go out in search of buried treasure?
That's exactly what you want to do as a kid.
With their friends.
Yeah.
And that, again, this is another movie where friendship is the key. That's the heart of the film. Steven Spielberg came up with the story. Chris Columbus, who became a very successful director, he wrote the screenplay. He also wrote the screenplay the year before. It was his first screenplay for Gremlins. Mm-hmm. So before he made it as a director, he was an ace screenwriter, capturing the spirit and the whimsy, that sort of wide-eyed adulation that Spielberg captures so well in the movies that he's directed.
Well, speaking of wide eyes, Richard Donner talked about how to direct the kids to react to the harrowing things they were going through. He would just yell out, "Big eyes." And they'd all go and react to that. Or one scene, he wanted to get Corey Feldman really excited, so he said that Michael Jackson was going to come visit the set, and he was like, "What?" And I think he's like, just joking.
Well, didn't Spielberg and Donner send the kids to see Michael Jackson on his victory tour? Because it was like filming, it filmed in 1984 when he was touring with the Jacksons for Victory. So they actually sent the kids to see them at Dodger Stadium.
Which is amazing to think of all the talent that was watching Michael Jackson performing that night, because the cast in this movie is incredible. You see all these child actors. I mean,
Short Round.
You have Sean Astin, you have Josh Brolin, you even have John Matuszak, who used to play for the Houston Oilers, and then he played one of the great villains of the 80s, Sloth. That's what I love about this movie, is that you have Sloth, and it's like, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? Whose team is he going to end up fighting for? And the Fratellis are the perfect level of menacing bad people, but also there's a sense of humor built in there, too.
Yeah, they're not bumbling.
You're never too in fear of what's going to happen to the kids.
And Josh Brolin, you mentioned Josh Brolin. This was his feature film debut.
Was it really?
Yes, it was.
You always learn something hanging out with Mantz and Malone. You always learn something.
Yes.
There's been rumors of a sequel for a long time. Would you want to see a sequel to The Goonies?
Well, so is it the kids grown up and maybe their kids follow an adventure? That would be cool.
That could
as long as it's not the Goonies 2, the Nintendo game, because I still hate that game. One day I will beat it, even if it's impossible.
Well, this movie was a hit. It cost about $19 million to make. It made over $60 million at the box office, which for 1985 was pretty decent. But the highest grossing film of 1985, Back to the Future. There
so
you
it
go.
all winds back together again, just like that screenplay. All right, let's move on to the segment which makes us feel extra old. Rewind Remembers, where we celebrate anniversaries. So 20 years ago, Crimson Tide came out.
Great movie.
The submarine action drama directed by the late Tony Scott, starring Denzel Washington and Gene Hackman. It was #1 that week. Pretty much a classic now. And then also The Englishman, who went up a hill but came down a mountain. A historical period drama starring Hugh Grant as a cartographer. He goes to a small Welsh town to measure a mountain, ends up falling for a local girl. You ever seen that movie, Mark Ellis?
I have never seen that movie, but the look in Hugh Grant's eye right there says they're never going to catch me with Divine Brown a couple months after this movie comes out.
Cheeky.
I remember my aunt, who was staying with us at the time, went to go see that movie because she had such a crush on Hugh Grant, and so she brought Hugh Grant fever to all the females in my family. With Crimson Tide, there's very few movies that the whole Ellis family could agree on wanting to go see in the theater together, and in the 90s, it was 4 films. It was Apollo 13, Forrest Gump, True Lies, and Crimson Tide. We all loved it.
Yeah, well, you love Crimson Tide too.
I love Crimson Tide. It's definitely one of my favorite Tony Scott movies. It's the last movie, one of the last films that Jerry Bruckheimer produced with Don Simpson before he died. But what's great about this film is the battle of wits between Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington. They both are flawed. It's like, whose side are you on? It is such a great cautionary tale for the aftermath of the Cold War. It is tension-filled, exciting, well-acted. Also a movie with very great dialogue. As for The Englishman Who Went Up a Hill and Came Down a Mountain, I remember I saw this after I saw Four Weddings and a Funeral, and I liked it. I mean, it felt a little more, British than Four Weddings. Four Weddings was the movie that were, I think everyone basically discovered Hugh Grant, and this movie sort of rode on that film's coattails. Four Weddings is a better film. Englishman is decent. It's fine. It's charming. It's a good date movie. Why not?
Well, 30 years ago, also 1985, Brewster's Millions came out, which is the comedy starring Richard Pryor as a man who discovers his great uncle has left him $300 million, and to inherit it, he has to spend $30 million in 30 days following a set of rules. Also starred John Candy and Rick Moranis. Where did he go? And then also Rambo, First Blood Part 2, the second installment in the Rambo series, starring Sylvester Stallone, reprising his role as a Vietnam vet, John Rambo. It didn't get very good reviews, but it was a huge box office success. Probably the most recognized installment of the series. Mark, I'm guessing you love this Rambo?
I had a ball with this version of Rambo because whereas with the first film you can look for the dramatic elements, you can see the subtext about a guy coming back from Vietnam and being disillusioned and jaded and feeling like an outcast. Here, let's just blow a bunch of crap up and let Stallone flex and see how that pays off. And it does to a gloriously dumb. I don't love this movie from a cinematic standpoint, but it was a lot of fun to watch. When if I was a kid and I had seen the Goonies, it's the same kind of thing. This made me want to be at least outdoorsy and go outside, run around, and probably beat the crap out of my little brother. It's
like Hot Shots Part 2. They made fun of Stallone and Rambo and the kill count.
I liked First Blood Part 2. It's a lot of fun. I mean, the First Blood was gritty. It was more serious. I think this movie didn't take itself as seriously. At least it didn't try to, because if you watch it now, it's a fun movie. It was a fun movie back then. It was kind of like one of the ultimate 80s movies, along with like a film like Top Gun. Another date story. This one not as successful. This girl, Vicky, that I really liked a lot. I knew that she loved Stallone. I took her to see the movie, and after the film, we went to Friendly's, and
you tried your routine again.
I tried the routine. It did not work. And I dropped her off and never saw her again.
I hope Joanne wasn't at Friendly's that night, too.
Yeah.
Who is this
guy? Like,
Joanne was a much more successful story.
This is what he does.
I hope she's watching.
Should have taken Vicky to Brewster's Millions.
Oh, I don't think she would have even gone with me to see Brewster's Millions.
No.
I don't remember a whole lot about this movie. Richard Pryor made a lot of bad films. This is one of them. It's not a movie that resonates.
Makes me want to see the film again, though, because it also has John Candy and Rick Moranis in it. And with those three comedic geniuses on screen together, there's got to be something in there, right?
You know what I'd rather watch again? Back to the Future.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we're bringing it back.
Bringing it
to
back.
the future, just like the awesome screenplay.
Yay. Well, staying in the 80s, back to adventure films now for our hidden gem. Rewind reveals Flight of the Navigator, which came out in 1986. It's a sci-fi film directed by Randall Kleiser, starring Joey Kramer as a 12-year-old boy goes searching in the woods one night for a mysterious sound, gets knocked unconscious, wakes up. Boom, it's 8 years later, but he's the same age. Turns out alien intelligence took him. He needs to be the navigator for a ship for a little robot called Max to get back to his home planet. Also stars Sarah Jessica Parker. Mark, it's a really complex plot, but again, it's another 80s film, quite dark. and also treats its audience with intelligence.
Every time I hear the term compliance, my first thought is still that's what Max always said to David Faraday in Flight of the Navigator. This is the movie I alluded to earlier, which Back to the Future, we're tying everything up now, is that I saw this in the theater and I finally made it through a movie, sitting in the theater the whole time and not being a rambunctious kid and running out. I was engaged in this story because this kid, David, reminded me of somebody who I could be. And he had this incredible experience, went on this great journey where it was terrifying because he sees his family has aged 8 years and he's the same. That's the stuff of nightmares. But then he also gets to go to this weird compound and he doesn't know they're going to study him. All he knows is that he walks into his room and he's got all these unopened toys. It's literally Christmas morning for this kid. Toys everywhere because they're trying to distract him from the fact that they want to do some weird stuff to him. That and Sarah Jessica Parker having gone to see a Twisted Sister concert the night before. His wife, she had purple hair. There's just those movies in the 80s that seep into your gray matter because your gray matter has no other information yet to absorb, and it just has never left. It's one of my favorite films of all time. It really is.
Doesn't Joey Kramer look a little bit like Henry Thomas?
Yes, he does.
Yes,
yeah,
he does.
And it does feel very
ET-esque.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It feels very ET-esque. And the score by Alan Silvestri, he did the score for Back to the Future. Mm-hmm. So there were a lot of elements to Flight of the Navigator that made it work. So I can see why it would really just kind of hit you right here, pal.
And head of the class is Howard Hessman, is also in the film.
Howard
Yes.
Hessman. Head of the class. Hey, come on. He was WKRP in Cincinnati.
That's right.
Now that's what I'm talking about.
Now, Matt, do you think this type of movie is one that could get remade these days? Because it kind of feels a little Tomorrowland, maybe a little Super 8.
There was a rumor, or there was talk back in 2009 that they were going to do a remake of Flight of the Navigator. And in 2012, the director who's doing one of the Star Wars spin-off movies was in talks to direct this film. Not Garth Franklin, the other guy.
Trank?
Yes.
Josh Trank?
But that was back in 2012, and there's been no reports of any movement along. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely ripe for, with all the other movies that keep getting remade, why not Flight of the Navigator?
Yeah, would you want to see that, Mark, or is this sacred to you?
Too many Twinkies. As long as they keep that line in there, I'm good. It's sacred to me, but I think that it's a story that should be celebrated by more people that maybe haven't heard of the movie.
It feels strange for a Disney film, but the CGI still holds up really well.
It does,
the robot voice is Paul Rubens, who I know you love Pee Wee Herman. Yeah, you can do a very good Pee Wee Herman. And it sounds like him. I watched it for the first time the other day because I'd never seen this movie, and I really enjoyed it. It's got that feeling again of making you feel like a kid, and you remember being that young and wanting to go on this great adventure and even fly a ship. How cool would that be?
And correct me if I'm wrong, I think this came out before Pee-wee's Big Adventure did, too. Paul Rubens had already been doing the Pee-wee character for a while.
Wrong.
When did Pee-wee's Big Adventure
came out in 1985, buddy.
Oh,
come on. Give it up. Give it up right here, pal. Yes.
Give
it up. Come on.
If I can get some plutonium in a DeLorean, I'll go back in time and not ask that question.
Well, this didn't do very well at the box office, but it's obviously very loved.
It did well in my heart.
It did well in the heart. $18 million. It cost $9 million. It made 18. Right. So it made back its budget. Why not?
Yeah, and it was really entertaining to rewatch. So there you go. This weekend, rewatch a bit of Back to the Future, rewatch a bit of The Goonies, and rewatch a bit of The Flight of the Navigator, and then you'll feel like a kid again. Or maybe you are a kid and you're watching it, and then it makes me feel really old. But anyway.
It makes you feel old. It makes me feel really old.
Let us know your favorite 80s adventure films in the comments below. Mark Ellis, where can people find you online? Harass you and stuff.
Twitter and Instagram at 5150Ellis. Okay, one Back to the Future trivia question.
Okay.
What was the name of the guy whose farm it was that he was growing the pines? Old Man who?
Did
I do it? Did I do it?
I think you did it.
You got us.
He had this dream of breeding pine trees. Right. Old Man Peabody.
Peabody, yes.
Of course. And Mantz, where can people find you at peabody.com?
That Peabody, they can find me at the Twin Pines Mall, where I'm on Twitter at Movie Mantz. You can also find me on AccessHollywood.com and catch Access Hollywood on Fridays and on the weekends where I'm reviewing movies. And you can find us, Malone and Mantz, hosting profiles with Malone and Mantz on the Popcorn Talk Network. We celebrate the greatest filmmakers, actors, and actresses of all time. More classic films. So please go to our Facebook page, which is Profiles with Malone and Mantz, and give us a like.
I like that. Thank you so much. And you can find me on Profiles. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, maybe a little bit of Periscope. Maybe I'm over it by the time this episode comes out, at Alicia Malone. Make sure you share the show with all your friends. Until next time, let's get in the DeLorean.